Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud. Today we're going to be talking about the new moon in the third decan of Libra. Hope that you're having a wonderful Friday afternoon out there. We are going to be diving into all things Libra. We're going to be talking about the new moon. We're going to be talking about Venus hosting. We're going to break down some of the astrology that's coming a little bit before and a little bit after the new moon. Uh, I'm sure that we'll have to address some comments about my face. I shaved my beard off this week. I got Venus in Virgo'd a little bit. I was trying to trim my beard up, and I just kept trimming, and then eventually it was just like, oh, this doesn't look right, and it had to all go. So Venus opposite Saturn, Venus in Virgo. There you go. The elephant in the room has been addressed. But I hope that you're having a wonderful Friday afternoon there. Rachel Fletcher is here. What's up, Rachel? You have reclaimed your spot as the first commenter. Welcome, friend. Hope you're doing well and everything is going well your way and you're having a wonderful fall. Okay, couple announcements before we dive in today, friends. Let's do this. So, of course, we're talking new moon in Libra 3 today. But you can find me, Spencer Michaud, over at spencermichaud.com. So, if you are looking for services for astrology readings, for astrology tutoring, for transit readings, if you want to prepare for what's coming down the road for you, you can find me at spencermichaud.com and the Book Now button if you would like to reach out, and I'd love to work with all of you. You can do a natal reading where you're getting to understand the patterns of your life through a mythologically based, tarot-based, fixed star, decan-based, astrologically based reading. You can also find something where we're going to outlay the next 3 months of your life and say, hey, this is what's coming down the road for you. How do we prepare for this with practical advice and helping to see it through the language of different symbols? And then, of course, I love teaching. So if you're wanting to learn astrology, especially the decans and tarot, etc., you can reach out, and I love to do tutoring sessions as well. I also have a store that you can visit, a webinar store, if you want to learn at your own pace. If you like a thorough education that is told with funny anecdotes, but also with a lot of information that you can refer to back over and over and over again, at the webinar store on my website, spencermichaud.com, you can find the decan webinars, which I've done 12 different webinars to address all 36 decans, and each of those are 3.5 to 4 hours long. I did a wonderful series with my partner Tanya Andrews called Dignity and Devotion, where we were breaking down the 7 traditional planets, but in the language of how to create a ritual practice around that, how to do astrological magic, how to do an election, how to create an altar space, how to have a daily devotional practice to those deities. All of those can be found there as well. I also have some teaching material about how to use the tarot along with astrology as well. So go find that at spencermichaud.com, click on the store button, and I hope that that information will serve you well. Speaking of Tanya Andrews, she has a wonderful magical business called Third Coast Mojo. She's got some cool new stuff coming. Oh my goodness, there's some cool stuff in there. This week we have Venus in Libra's Look Me Over oil, which is a classic conjure formula to help attract eyes to your business, to help maybe sweeten the offerings that you have for people. So if you're trying to drum up some new business and have some good exchanges, Venus in Libra, Look Me Over is a great one to enhance your business. We've got some other cool stuff happening that's coming down the road here. There's all sorts of things that are about to be listed. I'm really excited about it. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag yet, but there's a lot of great stuff. So check her out, Third Coast Mojo. You can, of course, find me as well with a newsletter that if you sign up, you're going to be getting updates as to when I'm going live. You're going to be getting updates as to what classes are being offered, discounts. Third Coast Mojo updates come through my newsletter. So if you're wanting to know when these new products are dropping, that's a great way to stay up to date. So I hope that you will sign up for that as well. And then finally, if you would like to support the work that I'm doing here today, you can purchase a super chat while I'm live on YouTube, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com and become a patron there and help support the work that I'm doing, help to enhance all of the materials that I draw upon, help me to subscribe to all the digital services that I use to do these broadcasts each week. All of those things are really helpful, and it buys me really the gift of time to continue to do this work. So That is very much appreciated. Thank you so much for everyone who's been so generous with your time, resources, and support over the years. So easiest thing you can do if you want to support the channel is like this video today and subscribe to the channel and tell your friends about it. So, okay, announcements are done. So I've got some more people checking in here. What's up, Jody? It says, hi, Spencer and friends. I love the new look. Spencer, thank you. Happy Friday. Thanks, Jody. It was, again, a little unexpected. And it was trying to be a somewhat of a trim, but it became losing the beard. So I don't know. I'm coming to terms with it. I kind of enjoy having some facial hair, but I know everybody's got their preferences. And the good news is it'll probably grow back within a couple days or a week or so. So we'll see. But I appreciate the compliment. And maybe it takes some years off of my face. I don't know. Lisa James is here. Says, hey, Spencer and chat. How you doing, Lisa? Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well, my friend. It's nice to see you in the chat. And looking forward to working with you here today. K-Wow is here. What's up, Kristen? Nice to see you. Hope everything's going well your way, my friend. And Javier is stopping in. Says, hey, yo, hope everyone is well. Wickedly challenging last couple of days. I hear you, Javier. It has been a challenging past couple of days for sure. We had some Mercury-Pluto squares that were happening. We've got the last few days of Venus and Virgo, which can be equally challenging as well. Venus and Virgo is Venus in its fall, a place where it's not exactly happy. And in addition to being in its fall, it's opposing Saturn. So getting consensus and, beautification things can be challenging, but the good news is there is some triplicity dignity for Venus, so maybe you'll get this. We will get the support of Venus as far as the support of our communities. But yeah, it has been a last couple of days have been a little funky. I've been utilizing whatever discomfort I had to clean my house and vacuum and do a deep clean of the kitchen. That was what led to all of this. Like, I was trimming my beard and I was like, I'm gonna trim my beard a little bit before I vacuum the house, because then you can vacuum up all the hair that gets around. And then one thing led to another, and you got baby face suspense here again. But there's so many different ways to deal with this astrology, friend. Hopefully everything's going well your way. Javier says, I heard about a transit this week about over plucking. I guess it hit Spencer. You know what's fascinating, Javier? Venus is my time lord. So one of the things that I will say is that Venus in Virgo can be paying too much attention to very small details. And really the way that things went sideways when I was doing a little trim was, it was like I was getting obsessed with it being like even, which is like a balance thing with Venus. And there were just little things. I was like, oh, I got to trim a little bit here. No, that's not right yet. And eventually it just got to the point where I was like, oh man, this whole thing needs to go. So overdoing things, overworking something is something we may have been experiencing this week with Venus and Virgo. I often talk about my experiences as a child with a Virgo stellium on my chart, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars, where if I was working on a creative project, I had some perfectionistic tendencies with it, where I would, erase until I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted it to be photorealistic. I didn't want it to have any flaws. But what I would end up doing is sometimes I would just literally erase a hole in the paper, just like destroying the entire composition, because I was so obsessed with one particular part. And I feel like that was sort of what happened a little bit this week too, is I was obsessed with one particular part of what was going on, and I just kept working it and working it and working it until it needed to be reset. So maybe there's something in our lives this week where we're working on something, but working on it in such a detailed fashion that we end up either destroying what we're working on, or maybe just needing to scrap it and start over again. And that's okay. You know what the cool thing is that Venus is going to improve its condition from Virgo into Libra within the next few days. So maybe this reset was what we needed to get things moving forward in the right direction. Javier says, it's all hitting me hard. Need to get me some good Spencer and Friends time. Oh, I'm glad you're here, Javier. Glad you're here. We'll try to be an eye in the hurricane for you, Javier. That's kind of our theme this week with the new moon in Libra 3, sort of being that calm center while all the things are going on around us, and how do we find balance and equilibrium? Javier says Venus is being a bit of a bitch this week. Maybe a little bit, right? Maybe a little bit. But again, I think as unhappy as she may be right now in Virgo, and don't get me wrong, if you have Venus in Virgo natally, there are some positive things towards this, especially when it has secondary dignity. Venus also has some dignity in the second decan of Virgo, and also has some triplicity dignity, I believe, in night charts. So there is some positive things that we can glean from it. But overall, our overall ability to create win-win situations, to be able to harmonize, maybe boosted quite a bit once Venus moves into Libra on the 13th. All right. Okay, friends. So let's start talking about this new moon. What do you say? So we've got this new moon in Libra 3, 28 degrees of Libra. And I'll tell you what, I kind of like this new moon. I think that there are certain new moons that look challenging. There are certain experiences in our life that we're all going to experience it a little bit differently. So a positive new moon for one person could be a little bit more challenging for another. But I would say overall, objectively looking at this, there's some positive things to take away from this. And I will break down why I feel that way. So let's just take a look at the chart just for to begin with. And what we're seeing here, I don't know why this is all screwy. There we go. So what we have here really is a new moon that is hosted by Venus. Venus is in its own sign of Libra. It has all the resources that it needs. It is co-present with the new moon, okay, which means it's in the same house, it's in the same territory. The host is home, right? So think about if you're visiting somebody and they are leaving or they're somewhere where you can't reach them. It's probably pretty difficult to know where the bathroom is, where you're supposed to sleep, where you're supposed to, are you able to eat this food, or what are we doing here? Like, there's no communication. Do you have the door code or the keys or whatnot? And like when Venus is in Virgo, it's like that host is off somewhere else and they're not in good shape and it's hard to communicate with them. But when Venus is in Libra and hosting these planets, it's like the host has come home, they are feeling relaxed, they're refreshed from their vacation or their trauma, and they're so happy to be home. And they're like, hey, everybody, like, it's great that you're here. Why don't you have a seat? And I'll make you a beautiful, 12-course meal or whatever it is. That sounds a little ambitious, but really being able to take care of you. And the sun and the moon are being well taken care of by Venus in this new moon. The other cool thing about this new moon, there aren't any aspects from the malefic planets. Mars and Saturn are both in aversion to the new moon, so they're not really creating a lot of problems within this chart, at least to the moon itself. And we do have an overcoming square from Jupiter. So Jupiter is also in an aspect. Now, that could lead to maybe doing a little bit too much, but I think that in Hellenistic astrology, we have a condition called on the 10th, when a benefic planet is 10 signs away, like Jupiter is here in the chart, away from whatever planet it's touching. We kind of see positive good fortune. So I think that even though we may have to deal with the challenges of excess, I think that there is good news on the way for this new moon. So let me check in here. Rachel says, very overwhelming times here, but the silver lining was that I connected with a friend who's been out of touch for a long time, and it was a lovely gift. Oh, I like that, Rachel. Connecting with old friends is always good, right? Especially when we haven't seen them for a long time, and being able to coordinate and finally have our lives match up in positive ways. That's a good thing. Good thing. Javier says, you are right, Rachel. Gratitude practice always helps. I like that. Gratitude is helpful in these times, for sure. Sirius Black is here. What's up, Carl? Carl. Our good friend Carl is here. Kooky Uncle Carl from our Deccan Walk-In. And Laura the Riggs is here. Nice to see you, Carl. Hope everything's going well your way, my friend. You got a nice Libra new moon coming up for you. Hopefully activating some of those beautiful Libra placements in your chart. But thanks for stopping in and letting me know that you're with us today, Carl. Yeah, Carl's here. Okay. So let's break down the sun and moon in Libra 3. And what I'm going to do, and we'll come back to the chart. I'll break down more of the transits and how it's going to unfold over time. But let's bring the Deccan flashcard for Libra 3 up to the screen. So this is going to help you to understand sort of the themes for the 10-degree section associated with Libra 3. In the practice and the work that I do, I like to break down the zodiac into 10-degree sections called decans, rather than just the 12, 30-degree sections that we know as signs. And it helps us to bring us some specificity. It helps us to bring the language of the tarot into what we're doing. And it gives us also some deities and spirits to work with from a Hellenistic fragment called 36 Heirs of the Zodiac. And it gives us a really great language to work with. There's also fixed stars associated with these decans. A lot of cool stuff. So this is the Jupiter ruled face. Okay. Each of these decans or faces has its own planetary ruler, and it sort of colors the sign. So this is a Venus ruled sign, right? So the core essence of Libra is balance, harmony, finding justice, seeing things from someone else's perspective. Objectivity often can be associated with air signs in particular. This is a decan where Saturn is exalted, so finding the right balance and maturity to deal with a situation. But this is a Jupiter ruled face, so this could be something where we create harmony and peace through our externalized actions that will bring honor and merit. One kind of secret signification, I don't know how much of a secret it is, but when you study Hellenistic astrology, you learn things about Jupiter, where Jupiter being associated with the solar sect, right? The team of planets that is related to the sun, which have significations of like conscious actions, of being able to do something because you are aware of it in your mind, and you are taking actions with those planets. Now with Jupiter, we're taking actions out in the world that bring about justice, that bring about peace, that bring about order, harmony, equilibrium. And it's a very conscious action, where sometimes when we talk about Venus, for example, Venus may be doing something a little bit more intuitively because it is a planet related to the lunar sect or the moon, right? So when we talk about good fortune associated with Venus, it's often good fortune that we become open to receive. When we talk about good fortune associated with Jupiter, it might be a result of actions that we have taken out in the world. So this is an interesting one because it is a decan that's associated with taking action through our conscious thought, but in a sign that is related to opening to receive. So how do we balance those two things out? Well, maybe we need to take some actions and then start to be open to the results that come to us. Maybe we need to center ourselves first, and then the good fortune can come to us. And I think that's one of the main themes of this decan, is how do we become centered first before we bring that energy to a situation that we want to restore harmony to. The eye of the hurricane is an apt metaphor. Oftentimes what Libra is searching for is a harmonious situation. So externally, oftentimes they're looking for the perfect environment that will be perfectly balanced. Well, what this decan of Libra teaches us is that we're never necessarily going to find a perfectly balanced situation forever. We may have periods where we experience the right equilibrium, the right harmony, but those scales are always tipping in one direction or the other. And there's a lot of maintenance that we need to do to keep those scales balanced. And oftentimes when we are chaotic, the metaphor that came up in our decan walk that just started was the snow globe, which is, I think, a better one, maybe, or a different one than the one I've been using, which is like a jar of sand or a jar of sediment, where if we keep shaking up the snow globe, we won't be able to necessarily see what the scene is. And sometimes we need to let that snow settle before we can understand what we're looking at and what actions we want to take out in the world. So with Libra 3, what we're doing is we're trying to find an internal place of peace, of an internal place like the hub of the wheel, so that all the twists and turns of fate and of fortune aren't necessarily going to throw us off. Now, there is a spirit in this decan called Nemesis. And Nemesis was the ancient Greeks' answer to another spirit called Tuke. Now, Tuke translates to chance or fortune. And oftentimes, chance and fortune were distributed randomly. Tuke was associated with the moon, right? The random distribution of fate. And Nemesis, of course, was the deity that restored right proportion after the random distributions of fate. So this might be a chance to restore order, harmony, and equilibrium if you've been dealt a challenging hand. And in life, we're always going to be dealt different hands here and there. There's going to be things that are out of our control. There's going to be things that are constantly in motion. There's going to be our wills coming up against other people's wills and desires. And then how do we navigate those? How do we find the balance? How do we find the peace between us and another party? And it comes through oftentimes a lot of micro movements, a lot of little things behind the scenes that keep things going. You'll learn this if you are a manager of groups of people. As somebody who's taught a lot of group classes, I'm constantly measuring and weighing and balancing all of the different wills within a classroom. My own will, the will of my students, the questions that they have, etc. And I'm always trying to make little adjustments to maintain the peace and the harmony of the group. And that is a very Libra III type of thing to do. What I have learned as someone who is a part of spirit Libra III, okay, part of spirit can be how we deal with those twists and turns of fortune, of fate. What kind of reactions do we have when we're facing a crossroads in our life? A lot of the work that I do, a lot of the conscious intentions that I have are trying to restore peace to chaotic situations. I do this through my astrological work, where I work with a lot of people that have experienced a lot of great traumas. As a 12th house sun and somebody who has experienced some trauma myself, like that empathy that I have for those experiences draws to me the types of folks that are trying to figure out any type of answer that they can to some very, very difficult questions. And astrology, while it can't solve all of those problems, it can at least give us some understanding of what we're going through and what type of cycle we might be experiencing and what point in the cycle we might be experiencing it, so that if we're going through a difficult time, we can understand that that is not going to be permanent. That's not going to last forever. And oftentimes, clients will come to me like needing a confidence boost. And as a Libra III part of spirit, what I will do is I will try to boost their confidence. I'm trying to increase that which is lacking, in this case, confidence. And also, as a child of Nemesis, I guess you could say, I'm decreasing that which is excessive. There will also sometimes be people that will come to me struggling with addiction or something of that nature. There will be times where sometimes a client is struggling with overconfidence in a situation. And my role in that interaction is to be a voice of reason and say, hey, maybe we can slow down. Sometimes it's through rashness. So how about we slow down here? How about we have patience? How about we not put 10 more things on your plate? Because it seems like you're struggling with all of these things with even just a couple of them right away. So in that regard, I'm playing the role of Nemesis, which is a Libra III type of experience. I'm helping to decrease that which is excessive and increase that which is lacking. So when you're taking an audit of your life, which often happens during Libra season, this new moon, I think, can be really important for saying, all right, where do I have excesses in my life? And this is going to be especially important with Jupiter making a square to this new moon. We may be trying to understand, how do we deal with the excesses in our life? How do we deal with things that might be scarce, that need increasing? We also might be asking questions because of Jupiter's placement in the third 10-degree section of Cancer. How do we create abundance? How do we create luxury, I guess, is another theme. But how do we do that, especially without harming others? This is one of Jupiter's gifts in Cancer 3, is how do we further our own interests? How do we expand? How do we create prosperity, but do it in a way that doesn't take away someone else's agency, someone else's power, someone else's resources? These are questions that I think a lot of people are asking right now as we wrestle with late stage capitalism, if we wrestle with colonialism and those challenges, as we try to become a unified world. How do we embrace growth and healthy marketplace interaction without having to, put the boot on some other country or some other place? Like, this is something that's constantly flowing through my mind as a Mercury in the third decan of Cancer kind of question. I'm always kind of making those equations of how can I do things in the world that don't necessarily take away or diminish others. And it's not an easy thing to do, especially when we have a society that almost encourages us to compete with one another instead of help one another. And those might be some of the questions that we're facing with this new moon, is how do we cooperate with one another in ways that aren't competitive, in ways that aren't a detriment to one another, that are building each other up rather than tearing each other down. Let's see. Javier says, I like Pax written in the window. Yeah, that is a translation, I believe, of peace, if I'm not mistaken. And that's something that this card is truly trying to embrace. And that's a good catch there on that. So we've got the Pax is on the stained glass window in here. Kate is here. What's up, Kate? Nice to see you. Hope everything's going well your way today, Kate. Okay. Javier says, I'm feeling this card hard at the moment. Yeah, the other thing about this image in the Four of Swords that's associated with Libra III is it is called Rest from Strife. So if you look at the previous two cards, the Two of Swords and the Three of Swords, and the story of those decans, the first one is an awareness of our imbalances. The second card speaks towards the negotiations that are present when we're trying to negotiate a contract or an oath or an agreement. And here we may have rest from that tension. You know, when we have this, so we had this full moon in Aries 2, and the Aries moon was opposing the Libra 2 sun. So there may have been some intense negotiations where we were trying to find a situation that worked for us and another party. I started my Decan walk at the full moon. There was a lot of kind of last minute negotiations that were going on with participants, which is totally normal. This is the type of thing that happens when a class is going, but understanding how to negotiate win-win situations. And after we have a peak experience like that, we might need a break. And you can see in the Four of Swords, you can see the effigy or a tomb of a knight who is resting, or maybe that rest is death. But I think that in some ways, we can embody that imagery through just becoming still, becoming quiet, through meditation, through not necessarily having to churn through every thought. This is one of the things that I have found as a gift from this decan is we don't necessarily have to continue to churn through every single possibility to go down the road of anxiety. I shared with my friends the other day a reel from a person. He makes these, I don't know, these reels on Instagram, and he was talking about, you know, not necessarily having to engage with everything on the internet that is designed to make you have a negative, to reward negative engagement. I guess that was the point of it. Many of the things that we see online these days reward negative emotions, negative expressions, negative engagements, and they're designed to make us afraid. They're designed to make us feel anxious. They're designed to make us feel inadequate in a lot of situations as a marketing technique to make us buy things. And that's very manipulative and very exhausting. And the point of his reel was sometimes when you're faced with those types of things, with, like, you know, constant gaslighting in the news, etc., you know, a stream of garbage ads and AI slop, sometimes the best reaction is to turn it off, turn the phone off, you know, go sit on your couch and read a book, go outside, look at some trees, talk to your neighbors. And, you know, it's such a simple solution, but I think one that is so needed in these times where we just get so overwhelmed with the amount of noise. And just being able to take a break helps to reset our nervous system. My beautiful partner, Tanya Andrews, has a Libra III election that she did. I think this was last year. And one of the things that she did with Libra III was called Serene Queen. You can find that at Third Coast Mojo. Not to bombard you with more advertisements, but you know, it was something that was designed to calm your nervous system. I believe there's chamomile and lavender within it. And it's all about trying to find this peaceful center. Now, you don't need magic materia to do this, but it can be helpful if that's an aid that you want to use. But you can do this just by quieting the mind, and even if you have to set a timer, I found this to be very effective in small tasks that I want to do that I don't want to get distracted from, especially reading. Reading is something that I used to be able to do all the time. And since the internet age and the phone in your pocket, the supercomputer in your pocket age, it's become a little bit harder to not live more online. And I've had to do sort of I don't know, I guess the opposite of when I first started to engage with the phone, which I have to set a timer to say, I'm not going to touch this thing for an hour. I'm going to read for an hour. And oftentimes that hour turns into such a pleasurable experience that it turns into 2 hours. And I reset it. So how do we schedule in time to relax, time to not have noise bombarding us, right? This is, I think, the one of the main questions to ask yourself with this new moon is how can you set aside some time so that the blizzards of our life in the snow globe that is our lives can start to calm down so that we can see clearly as to what we want to do next. We're going to have interesting astrology coming up towards the end of the month that is very watery. We're going to be talking today about grand water trines. So to be able to feel the emotions necessary that a grand water trine is going to bring up, we need to get to a quiet place first. We need to calm the mind down. Sometimes our thoughts, whether they're productive or intrusive, can mask the deeper intuitive feelings that we need to deal with. That's called rationalizing your emotions. So oftentimes when we have something that we need to deal with on an emotional level, we often overthink it. And when we can stop those conversations in our head and we can stop all of those thoughts from going, it can help us to get in touch with those true feelings and to process them so that we don't have to keep burying them and forcing them down below the surface. And I think that that's what this new moon is going to help us do, and then start to unfold into the grand water trine that we will discuss in a minute. So Kate's bringing up thoughts of reciprocity, give and take. An important theme, Kate, when we're talking about trying to deal with an increasing enshittification of the world, where we have goods and services that are continually being more and more exploitive, where companies are nerfing things that we got used to being able to use and then charging an arm and a leg for them, planned obsolescence. And the antidote to that is goodwill, reciprocity, give and take. Maybe doing something that isn't always rooted in how much profit you can make from it. Those are important questions to ask. Kate says, this is really helpful for my meditation on my natal Mars return. Libra Sun and Gemini Moon will complete a perfect trine to my natal Sun. Trying to just focus on the Libra decan for now, but will reflect on the others as well. Yeah, Kate, I think that when we can combine some of those transits, and this is the beautiful thing about astrology, is we can understand individual transits like a new moon, but we have to look at it in the context of the symphony that is playing out in the background. And by you doing that and saying, okay, what's going to go on with my Mars return and the Gemini moon and all of those things, that can help you to understand which part of it you may need to be active within and which part of it you may need to allow to happen, right? So this might be a new moon where you carve out time to become still. So this is the balance between active and passive sort of endeavors, is what I was describing with making time to read. By me setting the timer to say, I'm not going to touch my phone for an hour to read, that is an active thing that I'm doing so that I can receive the information that wants to come to me through the book, or that just from not having so much external noise. That is an action you can take to become centered, to become quiet, so that you can bring that peace and those realizations that come from that peace to your external environments. Amira says, wow, you brought up a huge point. I believe my psychiatrist is doing this. That's why I'm resting on how to respond next. There you go. You know, I think that one of the things that I've learned over time is that when we're faced with a challenging experience in our life, it doesn't always require an immediate response. Sometimes it does. But most oftentimes, taking the time to center yourself, to meditate, to allow yourself to receive maybe divine guidance, that can lead to a much better outcome moving forward. When we feel like we have to be reactive right away, this is true for, it's especially true on the internet, because there are two things about dealing with being online that make this really challenging. First of all, it's very easy to hide behind an avatar, a screen name. We don't have to look the person in the eye that we're having the conflict with oftentimes, and we can fire off some response. We can have an argument with someone that triggers something within us right away, and that can lead to bigger challenges down the road. Instead of having to see a human being face to face and having all of the different types of unspoken rules of engagement that we may have when we're dealing with a person in real time. And it also allows us to calm down and really reflect on whether what someone said or did is bringing something up in us that we either haven't resolved as a trauma, or is something that we don't like about ourselves that we may be projecting onto somebody else. I know that this is something that I've often found in my life, is sometimes when somebody does something that I don't like in myself, it makes me angry because I'm like, oh, I'm working on this myself. And in that moment of unawareness, in a reactive state, we can make that so much worse. But if we take the time to reflect, if we take the time to calm and to center before we interact, we can say, you know what that person said is actually bringing up something that I want to work on within myself. So what that does, this is the beautiful thing, it actually helps you to bring your power back to your center. Oftentimes when people do things that make us feel unsafe or off balance, we are giving them power through our reactions, through feeling like that whatever they do is going to make us feel bad or feel good or whatnot. And this is true when we're looking at things like the news. When we have leadership that is around the world, not just in America, but around the world, that is leaning further and further towards authoritarianism, a lot of times those leaders will try to rile people up, get them scared in a way where they become immobilized. And if we allow leadership that does not have the best interests of the masses in mind, but only self-interest in mind, to throw us off with every imagined crisis. That's the thing that I'm really trying to work through here, is that I've been witnessing so many manufactured crises in the news and by leadership that at some point you have to just be like, that's not real. That is not real. For example, I have a friend, Devin. I don't know if Devin's here today, but my friend Devin lives in Portland, Oregon. And he's like, none of this is real. None of this stuff that people are talking about is actually happening. This is a manufactured crisis to create fear. And I have a couple people in Portland. I have another friend who lives in Portland. Portland's one of the coolest, most chill places in America. And the fact that that is the target of authoritarian leadership, to rile people up, is laughable. I mean, you see videos that are coming out of that of people like dressed in animal costumes, like knitting doilies to put around trees, and it's madness. And the way to deal with that sometimes is to just, I wouldn't say ignore it, but to differentiate between what is real and what is not, by becoming centered and not letting yourself taking the bait of someone who would like nothing more than to rile people up so that they can assert more power. And this is not just true between a community and a government. This is true in our individual relationships. If any of you have dealt with difficult people, and I've dealt with my fair share, okay, the last thing you want to do is add more fuel to someone who may be displaying a narcissistic hunger to feed off of your energy, right? And this is an opportunity, the new moon in Libra 3, to be able to say, okay, if someone is trying to provoke me, if I am centered, if I am calm, if I don't add more fuel to that fire, to that argument, there's nothing for them to consume any longer. And eventually, and the I-Ching teaches us this, eventually evil will start to consume itself when you don't give it anything to feed off of. And this is another, I think, really beautiful lesson with this decan, is when you become so calm and so peaceful and so centered that the evil around us doesn't, and the chaos around us doesn't have anything to feed off of, you become the hub of the wheel. You become unassailable in that regard. And that to me is an amazing place to be. Not easy to be there, and it's not permanent. There are some times where even the most meditative and centered of us get off balance, you know? But then that's why meditation is a practice. Meditation is not a one-time cure-all, fix-all. It is a practice that you need to do, hopefully daily, so that you can keep rebalancing, keep centering yourself. I do all sorts of practices every morning to keep myself centered and balanced. I have routines. I have prayers that I do each morning with an altar space. I do meditation in the morning. I eat the same breakfast every morning. Like, that is something that grounds and centers me. I pull cards and I do an I-Ching. I write in my journal. That's my greatest centering meditation, is I don't want all of the negative thoughts to be banging around. So like, I do a morning page where more often than not, my morning page is like a complaint diary. It's like anything that's bothering me. I don't want to hold on to it. I want to release it. But then I've learned too that like part of my journal has to be a turnaround. It has to be also what I'm grateful for, what I have gratitude for, so that I'm not just fixating on the negative things within my life. All right, let's see. Kate's talking about utilizing, what were you utilizing to fall asleep there, Kate? Meditation, right? Sometimes it's okay. Sometimes what we need is rest. You know, like that's how we restore our nervous systems as well. Javier says, nice. I'm interested in these water chimes. We will talk about those in a minute, my friend. There you go. Javier says, seems like this is practice. Absolutely. We talk about practice. Okay. Thinking about it all makes me cry. You nailed it. The fear. Yeah. Thanks for the laugh. Very helpful words. Cosmic Passport says, Virgo coming in strong. Oh, my Virgo placements or your Virgo? Maybe both of our Virgos, right? Hopefully some grounding can come to us through Virgo, Venus and Virgo, through other Virgo placements, etc. But happy to see you here, Cosmic Passports, and welcome to the chat. Okay, so let's start breaking this down in pieces, right? Let's talk about how we can understand. Yes, both. Cosmic Passport says, nice. Yeah, we have a very Virgo, pretty Virgo heavy group here. I think because of the detailedness, I think, of our broadcasts, and examining some of the I guess some of the microscopic details, I think we attract those types here. I tend to be a little bit, I guess the word would be thorough. I was going to say long-winded, but thorough may be a better description. But here's the rationale behind it. I don't want to just tell you what you should think or what you should do based on my observation of the chart. What I want to do is to teach you the techniques of being able to read the chart yourself and to self-regulate, but also to help you to ask the right questions. I think this is one of the things that Virgo types appreciate about our broadcast here, is we don't necessarily make declarative statements very often. What we do is we say, here is a range of possibilities, and you can start to look at what questions you can ask in your life so that you can become self-sufficient. I mean, this is the beautiful thing about it. What I would love nothing more as a teacher is to be able to empower you to understand these chart aspects yourself, so that if there's times where Spence isn't around, you know, where you know, your teacher isn't around, you can say, you know what, I've got this. I know how to break down this chart. I know how to regulate. I know how to do the things necessary to understand what's going on in my life. And there will be a time at some point where we're all going to pass on, and we're all going to need to figure out what legacy that we've passed on to the world. And if the legacy of this channel is helping people how understand how to read a chart and how to ask the right questions, that'll make me very happy. All right. Javier says it's very helpful, though, the thoroughness. I'm glad you appreciate it, Javier. I know it's not for everyone, and we've probably, if people can't handle thoroughness or 2-hour live streams, they've probably already moved on. But those of you who stick by week after week, I got to tell you, it really does fill my heart up, and I notice when people are here every week, and I so appreciate the people that are supportive of the work that I do, and that you really show me your support even just by being here. Your presence speaks so loudly. So appreciate that, friend. Yeah, Lisa, thank you for the thoroughness is the key, right? Well, here's the thing. Astrology can't be reduced to a few keywords, especially because it's such a symphony. If we did astrology like I see a lot of, just kind of more surface level astrologers, not everyone. There are some amazingly thorough astrologers out there. But there's also kind of this is indicative not just of astrology or astrologers, but this is indicative of culture in general. We want easy answers. We want quick fixes. We want sound bites. And to me, that is a complete disservice to each other, because life isn't a soundbite. Life isn't a quick fix. Life is long. Life requires nuance. Life requires understanding context. And a lot of the conflicts that we have in our modern times is because we've reduced our understanding of an issue to a quick fix, to a soundbite, and then that becomes polarizing. If we understood the nuance and context and gray areas and how things are always working in concert with one another, I think we'd have a lot more empathy for each other, and we'd have a lot more tolerance, I think. So this thoroughness, I think, is an attempt to bring nuance and empathy, understanding, and tolerance to one another through the language of astrology. Javier says, agree 100%. It's a language full of depth, history, and a use of many practices. Love it all. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So a couple things about this new moon. Let's bring the chart back up here. Okay. Going to take that off the chart, put this back up here. Sorry, it's not going to be huge. You'll have to trust me when I describe some of these things. But Venus is co-present with the sun and the moon. So we've broken down really the in-depth Libra III. So that's the area of the zodiac that is being lit up by the new moon, where intentions and seeds are being planted. Now, when we talk about the host of this, we have Venus, the host. It's co-present. What that means, co-present's fancy word, okay, for conjunct. I don't know if it's really conjunct is really the right word. It's not conjunct technically. It is, in the same sign. It is in the same temple. It is visiting the same land as the new moon, okay? And Venus has sort of a little special nuance in this new moon. It is conjoining a fixed star called Diadem. Now, Venus is going to be in the first 10-degree section of Libra. And if you have been following the channel for some time, you will probably remember, or maybe not, but the first decan of Libra is about an awareness of an other. It is about an entry into the dark part of the year, the contraction part of the year, the Saturnine part of the year. It is associated with an awareness, chokmah. Chokmah is a word that comes from the Kabbalistic tree of life that is associated with the twos in tarot. And the first decan of Libra is syncretized with the two of swords. So we get this chokmah in twos, this awareness of the element present in the specific card. And in this case, we have an awareness of the ideas or intentions of others. So Venus is going to help us to harmonize through our awareness of an imbalance, of an injustice, of an other perspective. Okay. And because it's conjoining a fixed star called Diadem. Now, Diadem is interesting because Diadem is associated with the constellation Coma Berenices. And Coma Berenices is basically the queen's hair, okay? It is it was a sacrifice. The queen sacrificed her hair to Aphrodite. She was the wife of Ptolemy III, I believe. This was in Egyptian culture. And she sacrificed her hair to Aphrodite for the safe return of her husband from war. Now you're saying, well, if it's Egyptian, what is this Greek thing? There were some overlap with Greek and Egyptian culture from what my understanding is. So there are some of these stories that come with overlapping deities, etc. So this diadem is associated with devotion to a cause, with creating harmony through our sacrifices. Sometimes that harmony is for our family, sometimes it's for our community. So to be able to restore equilibrium, like Libra III desires to do, we may have to make a sacrifice. We may have to let go of something for the good of the whole, for the good of the collective, but we may be able to do so in a way that isn't necessarily detrimental to us, right? Because Venus is the harmonizing planet. Now, if it was Mars, like let's say if it was Mars in its exile, hosting a Scorpio new moon or something like that, that sacrifice might be more painful. But since it's Venus, this is one that we may be willing that we may do willingly or just with grace. Okay, so this is Venus in its own domicile, conjoining the fixed star diadem, co-present with the sun and the moon. So it has a direct line of communication to provide all the resources necessary to move forward. Now this new moon is also squaring Jupiter. We talked about this a little bit already, but again, Jupiter is in the overcoming position. So here's Jupiter in the overcoming square to the new moon. We've talked about Jupiter in the third decan of Cancer. I won't belabor the point, but the gist of third decan of Cancer is scarcity versus surplus. Knowing what to do if you have more than you need, and knowing how to create an increase if you are lacking what you need. And that surplus, it could just be extra clutter around your house. This is something that I'm getting frustrated with lately is, you know, Tanya and I, the culture that we live in here in Southeast Michigan, in a town called Ypsilanti, is one where neighbors like to exchange things via curb score. So you will see in this neighborhood a lot of people putting things out on the curb and then bringing things back into the house. And there have been some curb scores that we've gotten over the last few weeks, and it's just like, well, we've brought some things in. Yeah, now we need to let some things go because it's cluttering things up. And I think this is one of the hallmarks of balance, is when you are bringing things into your life, there needs to be an equal and opposite reaction. There needs to be a letting go of something that no longer serves you. That's the reciprocity that we talk about. If you have been the beneficiary of someone's generosity, how can you pay it forward? Like if, for example, someone found something they didn't need in their house and we found it and it was valuable to us, and a lot of garage sales in our neighborhood too. How can we do the same thing? How can we find something that we're no longer using, pay it forward to someone else that may need that exact thing? So this is, I think, a huge question to ask with this new moon, is how can you let go of excess in a joyful way rather than a painful way, and maybe find the things that you need through those reciprocal relationships. All right. Chad's here. Nice to see you, Chad. Thank you so much for the super chat, Chad. Appreciate you. Appreciate your generosity here today, Chad. And thank you so much. This is what keeps the lights on. And I really appreciate you, my friend. Okay. So with this square, though, there is sometimes a danger of a square, even if it's with a benefic planet. And in this case, when the sun and the moon are squaring Jupiter, the challenge of this can be trying to do too much. Sorry, there's someone who's trying to do too much revving of their engine outside of my window as I'm talking. It's a little distracting. But anyway, as far as being able to understand what is enough, right? we have to be able to accurately evaluate what we have, what we don't, what we need, what we don't need. And sometimes when we're trying to restore balance and right proportion, we may overestimate our resources. We may overestimate what we can afford and what we can't afford. This is one of the challenges, I think, of Cancer 3, is there is a luxurious taste that comes through that decan, and we may need to be really cognizant of that as we move forward into this new moon. We may desire to beautify our space. We may desire to create some change within our living space that may have an artistic bent because we're dealing with Libra aesthetics. But we may also need to understand that things may require a little bit of belt tightening coming up. One of the challenges in America and worldwide, worldwide, is things are becoming much more expensive. Sometimes we are dealing with a limitation regarding our resources due to some of the political machinations of people in power. There's new taxes on everything. There's more difficulty making exchanges. The value of the dollar changes between different cultures and things of that nature, and that can make exchanges more difficult. So I think that one of the caveats with this new moon, and really the main negative side that we have to be aware of, is that we may desire something that is a little bit out of our range, a little bit could potentially create challenges down the road if we are not aware of being judicious about our spending. Okay, so let's see. Now, as I was saying before too, the good news of all this is both benefics are involved in this. So even though it is a square, we do have Jupiter making an aspect. We have Venus co-present, so they're involved with the new moon. And then our malefic planets, Mars and Saturn, are not aspecting the moon at all, or the sun. So this new moon doesn't have any malefic aspects. Now, they are making a trine to one another, and we'll talk about that as we move along into the grand water trines. But overall, with just the seed that we're planting, no malefic aspects, which is pretty cool. That's why this is, I think, one of the nicer new moons that we're going to have for quite some time. Okay. So let's do this. Let's take a little stretch break here. And do me a huge favor, if you can, during our stretch break, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, reach out if you have any questions in the chat, or send me an email at Spencer Michaud, astrology@gmail.com. If you want to sign up for a reading, you can find me over at spencermichaud.com. If you like my teaching style, there's all sorts of webinars available at the store on my website. If you were interested in Deck and Walk, we did happen to start this Monday, but if you're like, I missed out and I really want to do it, send me an email. We're just at the beginning of this journey. We might be able to find a place for you if you want to join our group. Again, awesome group so far, a lot of really kind and amazing people. So if you want to hop on board, probably the last week to do so. But yeah, reach out, send me an email, and we'll see what we can do. Okay, so now that we've given sort of the main details of the new moon itself, let's take a look at the context that is going to be unfolding with this new moon. Okay, so this, I think, is a really important feature of what we do here, is saying, yes, we have the themes of the moon itself, but what is that doing in the sky? What is this initiating, right? So first of all, we have Mercury entering its retrograde shadow at 20 degrees of Scorpio on the 21st of October. So you can see this on the chart here. Sorry, I have to make it small. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the day previous. Okay, so this is Mercury at 20 degrees of Scorpio. We've got the transits on the outside. I'm going to keep the new moon on the inside. I know it's a little bit difficult to see, but you'll have to trust me. So what we're going to look at here with Mercury is preparing to station retrograde in November. So a day before this new moon, we're going to enter into a territory which is called its shadow, where we're going to be retracing our steps. So the other thing about this new moon is that things that we initiate, we may need to revisit at one point. Now, Mercury is going to be entering its shadow a day after conjoining Mars. So there's a Mercury-Mars conjunction in the second 10-degree section of Scorpio, which talks about revisiting something potentially through nostalgia, potentially through trying to merge very deeply on an emotional level with someone or something or some ideal, but not necessarily as a permanent revisiting. Sometimes this revisiting happens so that we can squeeze all of the essence out of that form that needs to be returned back to the earth. So a Mercury-Mars conjunction in the second 10-degree section of Scorpio could speak towards an important conversation that helps us to move forward and release something. Okay, so Mercury-Mars. And then Mercury is going to hit that retrograde shadow point. So whatever decision we make at the Mercury-Mars conjunction, we may have some loose ends that we have to tie up during the Mercury retrograde cycle. And Mercury is going to start its retrograde cycle on November the 9th at 6 degrees of Sagittarius, and then move all the way back into Scorpio on the 18th of November, and then station direct at 20 degrees of Scorpio on the 29th of November. So that will help you to get prepared for that cycle. Now, Mercury in the first 10-degree section of Sagittarius talks about swiftness, movement, maybe moving too fast. So be careful of moving too quickly once Mercury moves into Sagittarius, because you may have to revisit some of that. Kate says, come study with me. Kate is part of the Deck and Walk, and so is Javiera. So we've got two Deck and Walkers here with us today. It would be lovely if you want to join and hop on to the Deck and Walk train. It's not really a train, we're walking. So if you want to join the caravan, right? I'm picturing like the Lord of the Rings, the caravan just walking along. Yeah, Lisa's here too. Lisa found us from our Deck and Walk preview on YouTube. So really grateful for people that have been able to find us through this language of the decans, through the tarot, etc. And I'm really looking forward to going on this journey, this in-depth journey with people over the course of a year. Like, it's so rare to be able to connect with people for even a day, but to be able to connect with people for an entire year is just such a blessing, and I'm so looking forward to it. Javier says, I'm hoping to find peace during these days, right? With the new moon in Libra, right? Oh, and then Carl's here too. He's a Deck and Walker. We've got all of our Deck and Walkers here today. Carl is lurking in the shadows. I love it. I love it. Oh, Jody's here too. Excuse me. We have all of our Deck and Walkers here today, or at least a good portion of them. Jody, Carl, Javiera, Lisa, Kate. I love it. We've got the crew here today. Okay, so let's keep going. What do you say, Franz? What do you say, Franz? So keep that in mind, that Mercury is going to be retrograding back to this position shortly before this new moon. The first aspect that the moon is going to make is going to come on the 23rd. Now, in Hellenistic astrology, the first aspect that the moon makes after a new or a full moon has importance because it's being released from what they call under the bond, right? And the bond is sort of like holding the manifestation energy of the moon in check until it becomes visible, or until it becomes outside of the beams of the sun. So in this case, the first aspect that the moon is making after it separates by 15 degrees from the sun is a conjunction with Mars. So our ability to create equilibrium, to start to restore right proportion and balance through our new moon intentions will help to perpetuate the story that Mercury and Mars are going to initiate when they come together. The third 10-degree section of Scorpio is important because it is a decan that talks to us about the Kairos moment. The Kairos moment. And Kairos was a little cherub in ancient Greek mythology that had a lock of hair coming off of his forehead that could only be grabbed from the front, at the right opportune moment. And they said not even Zeus himself can grab Kairos from behind. Okay. So there may be something where we're coming to terms with a moment. Maybe that moment has passed. Maybe there is something that we're like, you know what? We had this intention to do something. We missed our opportunity. Now we have to let it go, right? Especially with the moon and Mars coming together. Mars is a severing and separating thing. Oftentimes I've dealt with clients that have prominent Scorpio 3 placements where oftentimes they will be dealing with a lot of unresolved trauma, and it is a Venus ruled decan. So there's a glamorization of a past form, okay? But the real work of that decan is to let go of the form and not glamorize it, not try to keep it alive. There's been a lot of I was talking with Javier about this. The YouTube algorithm has been serving up a lot of like true crime things since all these planets moved into Scorpio. One of the things that got served up to me was there's a new documentary on Netflix about Ed Gein, who was a kind of a serial killer in the late 50s in Wisconsin. And the movies, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Psycho, what was the other one? There's another movie Silence of the Lambs, were all inspired by this guy's horrific acts. And a lot of what he was trying to do was preserve things against the ravages of time. He had sort of an overbearing mother who was really abusive, was very abusive. And a lot of his atrocities were, I think, committed trying to process that trauma and trying to kind of keep her alive in various horrific, gory forms. And that always reminds me of Scorpio 3, of like the horrible things that can be committed, the horrible acts that can be committed to try to keep something alive that we really need to let go of. Ed Gein was a notorious grave robber. He was trying to resurrect some things that are already dead. And the interesting thing about that is that Scorpio is designed. It is an important part of the wheel for letting go of form. And the way to think about that is when you release a form that doesn't serve you anymore, what you're doing is you're liberating the energy and essence that animated that form in the past to find a new form that is more appropriate for it. Okay? When trees let go of their leaves, okay, I'll tell you an anecdote that is nature-based, right? What they're doing is they're returning those leaves to the soil, to compost, to feed future growth, and they are resting. The essence of that tree doesn't completely die, right? Yes, it is hibernating. But if it tries to keep its leaves and keep growing through the winter, it's impossible. It's not the right moment. It's not the Kairos moment. One example of trying to preserve the moment that I've tried to learn my lesson with is I have a currant bush that I have in a pot. And I wanted to bring it inside last year, and I did. I brought it inside. I didn't allow it to rest in the cold weather. And this year, it gave leaves again, but it didn't fruit. And that's because it didn't get the proper rest. It didn't get the proper cold stratification that it needed to be able to build fruit in the future cycle. So this year, it's going to stay outside. And if it survives, and if I'm able to protect it with like burlap or whatever, or straw, so be it, right? Maybe I'll put it in the ground where it's supposed to be and not in a pot. But you see the idea is when we try to mess with the cycle of nature, we try to have a cycle of growth or keep something alive that needs its rest cycle or needs to be released back to the earth. What we're doing is we're harming the future growth. And this is something that's very true in our life when we just start to glamorize this past relationship, this past form, this past idea, belief system, to the point where we do more horrific things to keep it alive. We see this in ideological politics as well, with people that are constantly glamorizing a past that never even existed. And they're trying to reclaim some kind of power, past, memory, nostalgia, ideal that was not really that great in the first place, right? It's crazy. And they do more and more horrible things to try to justify it. if they would release that form, the animating energy would create hopefully a more just society, or more positive growth into the future. I see we've got some people weighing in on this comment here. Let's see. Javier says, oh, many more than they show. They show from Psycho to now, right? With the inspiration with that Ed Gein story. And how can we become so desensitized in the process? Yes, exactly. We are becoming desensitized to some of these atrocities for sure. Javier says faith is also a big thing to meditate on, right? Yeah. I think, Javier, you're referring to the hard religion in the Ed Gein story. Like, what Javier is referring to is Ed Gein's mother, I think. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Javier's mother was a very, really hardcore fundamentalist and isolated her family. And then that led to a lot of I think a lot of mental health challenges for probably both her and her child, and led to some really crazy stuff. So yeah, I think that it's not an easy decan to work through, but with Mars there, I think that it can lead to severing of old habits that don't serve us too. The other thing that I have seen quite a bit with that decan is people recovering from addiction. Sometimes what happens with that decan is that the traumas that they are experiencing are so painful that they're trying to numb and dull them out with substances. And that only works for a certain period of time before your life starts to kind of fall apart. And I see a lot of beautiful rebirths, though, that come through accepting that change needs to take place within their life, and a lot of recovery stories in that deck. And so that could be another avenue that this astrology could express itself in. Okay, let's keep going. So that's our first aspect. Another thing to consider, and I'm going back and forth in time here, but Neptune is going to retrograde back into Pisces on the 22nd, the same day that the sun is moving into Scorpio. So we have those two things happening concurrently with one another. Neptune is going to move back into a sign that is more associated with escapism, more associated with trying to bridge the gap between our spiritual reality and our physical one. We could be feeling some extra strong feelings when these two things happen. Okay, especially here when the sun and moon are both going to be in Scorpio at the same time. Look at this stack up in Scorpio that's happening from the 23rd on. Okay, the sun, the moon, Mars, and Mercury all hanging out in Scorpio. And what they're going to be doing is they're going to be forming a grand water trine with Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter. So we'll break that down here in a minute. But just before we do that, an extra emotional time, because the moon's going to be out of bounds from the 23rd of October to the 29th. Moon out of bounds can be like where we're feeling extra feelings, where we're pushing our bodies to their limits. It's the planet is just not functioning the way that it normally would. It could be bringing up memories that are painful, or memories that are intense. It doesn't necessarily have to be painful. It could be just an intense memory. So all of that is contextualized within this grand water trine. Javier says, I can relate on the guilt. Growing up Catholic in Nicaragua, similar ways parents bring you up. Yeah, there are many instances of, I guess I would call it spiritual abuse. And don't get me wrong, not all organized religions are abusive. I think every organized system has had people that have abused it. The core fundamental essence of these faiths is not necessarily flawed, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of great teachings in all of the world's great religions. But as people who are trying to carry out some kind of divine ideal, we are subject to our own instincts towards power, towards greed, towards guilt and shame. And all of those things can color a tradition and lead to some of those spiritual abuses. So spiritual recovery is a real thing, especially if we've grown up in a really restrictive environment where the following of a certain set of religious rules or dogmas caused us to feel less than or disempowered or to feel like we were a bad person. And that can take a lot of years and a lot of therapy and discussions to heal from. So I hope that you're going on that healing journey, friend. Yeah, Javier says, yes, then leads to mental health issues and breakdowns. Absolutely. Yeah, I've seen that firsthand. I guess I would say that in my own experience, I was fortunate enough not to have a specific spiritual tradition forced upon me. I did have, my grandparents were Presbyterian or something, but I didn't really necessarily go into, I wasn't forced to go to church. My dad was the kind of guy that said, practice the golden rule, treat others the way that you want to be treated, and that can help moving forward. I do have ancestry, Mennonite ancestry, so I've studied a little bit of the Mennonites and kind of their approach to the world, and I kind of like what they stood for on a lot of levels. I think that I have some letters from some of my family members from the late 1800s, mid 1800s. They were deacons in the Mennonite church, and surprisingly, a lot of what they wrote about was just respecting other people's beliefs and not necessarily having to have the feel like have the hubris of thinking that you have all the answers from one tradition. That actually surprised me. So, yeah, there's all sorts of different ways to engage with having a spiritual practice. Eurydice Vega is here, says, I wonder how Neptune's move back into Pisces might feed addiction instead. Maybe the whole sign trine with Scorpio will support those working together instead of Neptune's fuzziness getting the upper hand. Ooh, I like where your head is at, Eurydice. I agree. And I think that this may actually be an opportunity to work through long-standing challenges with this grand water trine. Maybe there's all sorts of things that we all get sort of attached to through addiction, etc. Right? And the good news is that Mars is in its own sign, helping us to sever and separate from an illusion, right? This is what Mars in the the third decan of Scorpio does. It's severing those illusions. It's saying, no, that's not real anymore. That form is not vital. Return it to the earth so that it can find new form. Mercury might be helping us to ask questions about which of our forms are still vital and which ones aren't. Which dreams do we need to keep carrying on and which ones do we need to let go of? I'm having a mini sort of experience with this in my own evaluation of how the year has gone. We have a lot of projects in our house in particular. We were very ambitious about what we wanted to do with like building raised bed gardens and planting native plants. And there's still a bunch of things that are unfinished. And we may have to get really realistic about which of those things can we do with the time that we have. The Kairos moment may have passed for some of these things. And we may have to wait for the next cycle and put those dreams to rest for a period and see if the dream can still live. It was one that needs to be carried out. If there's no energy for the dream anymore, when the next cycle comes around, it probably wasn't the right time anyway. So I like what you're thinking with with Neptune there too. Yes, it could increase that desire to escape. I would say one of the things I've noticed lately, just in my own mental health journey, there have been some times over the last few months, I guess, where hope has started to wane a little bit more. We just are onslaughted with all sorts of challenges in the world right now. Some of them just through climate change, some of them through authoritarianism, some of them through resource management, international conflicts. There's all sorts of stuff. Health challenges that are going around still. It can be overwhelming. And I think that one of the things that it can be really important as we move forward into this grand water trine is, what is our relationship with hope? That is an important question to ask as Neptune moves into Pisces 3, because that decan has a spirit within it called Elpis, which translates to hope. In that decan, we are coming to terms with all of the ills that were released from Pandora's jar, right? It's a jar, not really a box. and Elpis was what remained underneath the lip of the jar. And when we're dealing with all of these horrific things, how do we maintain hope? This is something I've been thinking a lot about, especially with young people these days. It seems like, and maybe I'm wrong, but I have noticed with my daughter and some of her generation, there's been some nihilism that has crept in with the generation, and I can understand why, that they're having to deal with all of these challenging things, and they didn't get what they didn't get was the foundation of not facing some of these very real crises when they were growing up. For those of us who are, you know, I guess I'm an exennial, something like that. For those of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s, there was a period of time where, for a lot of us, life had some hopeful things within it. There were challenges depending on where and how you grew up. But I don't know if it was like this. I don't know if there was like a doom spiral that we were heading towards potentially. And how do we re-engage with hope? How do we re-engage with the impetus to try to better and change our worlds, right? Rather than just falling victim to this nihilism where we feel like we can't do anything to change anything anymore, and that we might as well just spiral towards oblivion. I think those are important questions to ask when Neptune is moving through Pisces, is what can we do to reignite our hearts and minds towards hope, towards making the world a better place, etc. Javier says, I agree. That's why my adult life I've found the acceptance, and also helpful that my parents have always been supportive of my spiritual journey. Positive words, you're a Dicey Vega. Yeah, I think so. I'm glad that your parents were supportive. It's not always you don't always find that, and I think that can be a real boon. And I know that not everybody has that, so we try to create community like that in different spaces too. Maybe this is a space like that, maybe something like Duck and Walk, but I hope that if you don't have those supportive parents, that you're finding your community in other avenues. Rachel says, I agree. I know of very young people in my life and in my community who are encountering a deep despair that is terrifying. Absolutely. So what do we do as people that grew up in a world where we had a vague awareness of some of these things, but they weren't so in our face, right? What did we do to stay centered? What did we do to put hope out into the world? And maybe we can be a guide for people, especially because we've probably been through some time periods where we have faced some crises at this point, Rachel, at our ages, and we've survived them. Obviously, we're still here. And how do we help the younger generation understand that, hey, this too shall pass, and if we come together as community, we can figure out ways to navigate some of these challenges, and maybe these bad times won't last forever, but it does take some realism too. I don't have all the answers. I want to just start the discussion. Javier says, my brother is 22 and I feel like he says things, I don't know, he makes me feel sad. Yeah. Well, we have to hold some space for that younger generation. They've been through a lot, That generation grew up in school having the pandemic right in their face, like a deadly disease right in their face the whole time. They've grown up with increasing authoritarianism and things of that nature. Resource management has taken quite a turn during that time. There's a lot that young people have had to process. And when you grow up like that in a fight or flight type of energy, it can lead to some really challenging, I think, mental health types of things, and some things that it's hard to navigate. I feel empathy for them more than anything else. Silent Murmur is here. What's up, friend? Says, if you plant them in the ground now, you may lose them due to shock, since cold season is arriving early. They're more likely to survive in containers with plastic protection until planting in the spring. Well, good practical advice for the currents in our life. Let's see if I can glean. I'm going to try to pull out the metaphor within that too, because I know that was a practical thing. But let's see. If we plant our things in the ground right now, so we're talking about the Kairos moment. There may have been something that we wanted to plant in the ground, like some dream that we wanted to plant, but the moment has passed. So instead of doing something where the moment isn't right, maybe we need to protect that dream, like Silent Murmur is talking about, keeping it in its container, but putting some kind of protection around it. So not only will this work with the current plant that I was talking about, but this could work with our dreams and our hopes, is that if the moment isn't right to enact those dreams and hopes, maybe we need to protect them and so that they don't completely die while they're laying dormant, so that they can wait for the right moment. I think this is really important. I think that oftentimes a dream is not dead, it is dormant. A skill that we have is not dead, it's dormant. And we need to protect it and keep the kernel of that fire, the ember of that alive within us. And maybe that hope is one for a more just and peaceful society. Maybe it's for a world that is working with each other instead of against each other. We need to keep that ember of hope burning so that when the time is right, when the time for action comes, that we can light that fire and have it turn into a great, glorious flame that will be purifying. Avira says, I think Pluto is hitting something for him. Well said about being a guide. We should all connect to make not silly mistakes that we have made in the past. Exactly. As we become the elders in the world, Javiera, we have to be able to guide people towards understanding the cyclical nature of the world. I think that when we fall prey to nihilism, we are seeing an endpoint to our world and to our societies. Whereas that's not the way nature works. Nature works through periods of death, growth, and rebirth. And if we've understood that through living through many seasons and cycles, but younger generations may not understand that completely yet. They may be starting to, but we have to help guide them towards that. Eurydice Vega says, Jupiter and Cancer getting in this trine, right? Looking there for hope? Absolutely. And a great point, right? Because we see Jupiter here in this grand water trine is exalted. I mean, Jupiter is the place of ultimate faith, right? This is where we surrender over to a higher power on some level, where is associated with religion, with spirituality, with faith. And it's in an amazing place right now for those particular types of experiences. So Jupiter is going to be helping us to maintain that faith. It is going to be smoothing out the process of letting go with all of the Scorpio placements. And it is going to be making a trine to the Saturn, Neptune in Pisces, where we may be feeling the weight of Pandora's jar, right? It's going to be helping to smooth that out through creating these connections with one another and helping each other get through those challenging things. Javiera says, thanks for saying that, Spencer. Appreciate you, Javiera. Eurydice says, dormant embers of hope. I love it. To me, that is a really great metaphor for the times that we are living in, because if our flames right now, if we burn too brightly in a time period where very brightly burning flames are quickly extinguished, there may be a need to keep the flame slightly less obvious, but still burning. The I-Ching talks about this. This is not just me coming up with this. The I-Ching talks about in times of corruption, in times of madness. There was a story in the I-Ching about the last just person in the court of Prince Ji, I think is the Ji, had to feign madness so that he didn't become a martyr to the drunken madness that was happening around him. He had to feign drunkenness and madness so that he didn't stick out as someone who was against the regime that came into power. And because he did so while maintaining his integrity. He feigned that drunken madness, but he didn't let his fire of integrity go out completely. That when the inevitable change happened, when evil finally consumed itself, he was one of the advisors that helped to restore some of the order and peace and the new government and etc., because he had maintained his hope, he had maintained his integrity, and he became a great advisor moving forward. So in these times that can feel hopeless, we have to keep those small embers of hope burning and stay true to ourselves, even if externally we are maybe not, it appears that we're capitulating. We don't have to capitulate to all of this craziness, but we also don't necessarily have to put ourselves in positions of danger so that we can't help when the time is needed moving forward. It doesn't mean we don't do anything. When an ember is burning, you still have to give it some oxygen. You still have to keep blowing on it, maybe even in secret, right? But crazy times we live in. Silent Murmur says they need time to adjust to the ground environment compared to being above ground or indoors. They may need a trellis support around them under the plastic to resist wind. All good advice. I've got a couple white pines in pots too that I don't necessarily want to bring inside either. So I'm thinking about wrapping them in burlap and burying them in straw. What do you think? Think that might work? We'll see. Okay. So this grand water trine, there are going to be two grand water trines. First is Mercury, and you can see Mercury trining Saturn and Jupiter with Neptune in the picture. So first we ask questions. Mercury is a planet that likes to contest. It likes to destabilize. So we may be asking questions about which forms in our life we need to hang on to, which ones are still vital, and which ones where the moment has passed and where we need to return those to the earth to create cycles of future fertility. That also is coinciding with the sun squaring Pluto, okay? So you could see that there's a Sun-Pluto square that is coming to the fore there. Now that is the challenge within all this, right? And I'm fixing an error here. Okay, so if we talk about the Sun square Pluto, we have, this is happening, mind you, in context with the grand water trine, okay? But here is the sun when it ingresses into Scorpio, squaring Pluto. Now, this is not the first time that we've had a planet squaring Pluto over the past few weeks. We've had each of these planets, Mars and Mercury, when they've ingressed into Scorpio, squaring Pluto. And my advice at those times was exactly what I've been seeing happening in a place like Portland, Oregon. When you're provoked by corruption within a system, by maintaining your integrity, by laughing at it on some level, you take the power out of it. By not acquiescing to the people who want to provoke violence for the specific purpose of exacting more power and control, okay? Of using their provocation and your reaction as an excuse to tighten the screws. This is another instance where we may need to maintain our balance, our centeredness, and be able to weather those types of actions of being a provocation, is that a word? A provoking of power, all right? A bit of corruption of power. So with the sun now making that square to Pluto, this could be leadership doing that. And not just, I know that is sort of still happened with Mars and Mercury, but this could be a highlight on the figurehead, because the sun often represents the quote unquote king, right? The leader, the focal point. So be very careful about how you wield and exert power, or how you come into contact with people who are wielding power. Again, as someone who has had experience working with people who have had mental health challenges and have had things like narcissism and personality disorders, you've starved them of their power by disengaging or by making light of something, etc. Mostly disengaging, okay? I think that it's easy to want to defend ourselves on some level of saying, oh, someone said something terrible about me, I need to clap back. And it's so easy to do that. But what you're doing is you're just feeding that fire. You're feeding that narcissism. You're feeding the troll. And this is an aspect, Sun squared Pluto, that I think it's going to be really important to maintain that harmony and equilibrium once again, and not fall victim to challenging circumstances. Now, the one warning I will give you with Sun square Pluto that I've observed, and this is a callback to Portland, Oregon a couple years ago, is when I've seen Sun Pluto aspects in the past. In this case, 2 years ago, it was a Sun opposite Pluto, where we saw people that were just literally protesters were being abducted off of the streets and putting in facilities, by the powers that be. Abduction is actually a theme that comes up with Pluto and the Sun, in my opinion. Because in myth, Pluto kind of erupted from the underworld and abducted Persephone and brought her back into the underworld. So I guess be careful of those types of themes coming up. If you are out doing things like protesting or things of that nature, don't give them any more power. Don't give don't feed the trolls, I guess is what I will say. So that isn't something interesting that's coming up in the next few weeks. And that's going to lead us to our first quarter moon. And our first quarter moon is going to be at 6 degrees of Aquarius. I'm sorry, is it? No, it isn't. The 29th. Maybe it is. Oh, I didn't go far enough further. Yeah. It just didn't look right on the screen. Sorry. So just give me a minute here. So if we look at, oops, I don't want to go 1 year. Now everything's going herky-jerky. I want to go 1 hour. So we're going to go to 6 degrees Aquarius on the screen here. And this has similar themes, right, to the Sun-Pluto square. But now the moon is activating that Sun-Pluto square. Themes associated with this, just decanically, outside of just Sun-Pluto power dynamic challenges. The first decan of Scorpio has to do with grief, ritualized grief of losing something or identifying a bad habit or something of that nature, and understanding that you're going to have to let go of it. There's also themes of in the tarot in the 5 of Cups, where there's 3 spilled cups, but there are 2 standing behind, and understanding that even though we've lost something, we need to start to reverse our perspective towards appreciating that which we still have. Okay. First decan of Aquarius shows in the 5 of Swords a conflict and a defeat. That's the name of that card or that decan. And it really shows like there's schadenfreude associated with that decan. There's people being cast into exile. So there may be more thematic material about feeling cast into exile or feeling like we've lost something that makes us feel disconnected and like we're wandering spirits or something of that nature. So this is part of a little bit of the challenge of the first quarter moon with the Scorpio sun and the moon in Aquarius 1. Let's see. We've got all sorts of good gardening advice from Sarah Murmur today. It says, they may just need an indoor replant in some pot, letting the side roots hold its walls and just remove 1 to 2 inches of the roots at the bottom to prevent rot while keeping security. This is great advice, Silent Murmur. Thank you for that. I'm gonna make sure that I remember all this as I'm doing my. I think this weekend I'm probably gonna be doing some of this stuff. So it's very poignant and timely. Appreciate that, friend. Okay. So we have one more grand water trine. I have a couple more aspects, and then we'll wrap for the day. Okay. Thanks for hanging out today, friends. Thanks for going on the longer journeys, the thorough astrological journeys with me. All right, so our second grand water trine is going to be from the 28th to the 29th. And this is coinciding, right, with our quarter moon. So if we go back a day, you can see the beginning of it, right? So we've got now, instead of Mercury making that grand water trine, it's going to be Mars. So see how we've got 3 of those planets trining one another here? So the way I see this playing out, just in my professional opinion, is Mercury is going to bring up the questions. Mercury is going to identify and ask questions, which forms we need to let go of, which ones we want to preserve, which moments have passed, which moments have not. How do we keep the dream embers alight, even if we can't have the bonfire of our imagination in this moment? Mars comes and says, okay, you've asked the question about which forms need to be preserved and which ones have outlived their time. Now Mars says it's time to sever and separate from the ones that don't serve you anymore. Okay, it's time to let them go. It's time to say, you know what? You don't need to keep hanging on to this illusion that this is actually giving you vitality. Okay. Now, the beautiful thing about this and the grand water trine part about it is that Jupiter is there to help. Jupiter is there to smooth that process. Saturn is there to help us be realistic about our feelings, realistic about what this means for our life. So instead of just Mars moving through and activating this need to let go and return a form to the Earth, it's going to have a greater impact because of this grand water trine. And the process could be, I don't know if it's necessarily a joyful process, but it is one that is probably easier than it would have been otherwise. Okay. So Mercury grand trine, water trine, identifies the form that needs to be let go of through asking of questions, through cataloging the things in our life that are vital and the things that are not. Mars comes through and says, we need to sever and separate. We need to return this. We need to eliminate this. I'm starting to appreciate Mars a lot more for this role that it plays. I used to fear Mars a little bit as a solar sect person. Like, I don't like losing things. But what I'm understanding now, that loss and letting go is so important for keeping and maintaining a healthy balance and equilibrium. Again, I hate to belabor this point, but we get so obsessed with growth. We get so obsessed with expansion in Western civilization that we don't appreciate the times of letting go. We don't appreciate the times of release. And they can be so liberating. It just feels so good sometimes to just let go of something that we were putting energy into that we weren't getting any return on. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was draining our energy and our resources rather than accentuating them. Okay. So go into the letting go part of it joyfully, without resistance. And then if you let go of those, my favorite metaphor, paddling upstream, right? If you let go of the oars and let life guide you in the direction that it wants to go to, if you trust in the divine plan, if you love astrology, you may understand that there is some order in the universe that is greater than ourselves. And if we truly surrender to it in a, I guess, a stoic fashion, rather than constantly resisting it at every turn, you're going to find your life is flowing a lot easier. You're going to be a lot less exhausted and burnt out, because a lot of the burnout and exhaustion that we experience comes from resisting fate and saying, you know what, I'm going to try to just, scratch and claw my way back into this working, even when everything in your life is saying that it's not. Okay. So important for that grand water trine, embracing Mars, letting go of something that's not working in your life, or that its form is not vital anymore. And it could be something as simple as just clearing out the clutter in your living space. I mean, it doesn't have to be some grand dramatic thing. It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to change your entire life, but just getting rid of some things that are blocking flow within your life can be really helpful. Okay. All right. It's good seeing you here, Javier. Always a pleasure having you here in the chat, friend. Carl says, these water trines are kiting your Mars and my Venus. How would those natal placements focus that energy? Okay, so this is one of the things that we would do as like a Deccan walk, right? Where we see things through multiple perspectives. So I think it's a good question, Carl. As far as kiting, so these grand water trines are making, there's a sextile that's happening to Carl's Venus in Virgo and my Mars in Virgo. So let me just talk this through for you real quick. In my natal chart, this is going to be a 4th house Mars, an 8th house Saturn, and a 12th house Jupiter experience. And all of that is going to be making that grand trine kite formation via the sextile to Mars, right? Or yeah, to my natal Mars, to the 2nd house. So if I'm just thinking this through, and I will do the same thing for Carl's chart, so you can see how this could work out for an individual getting their placements activated. So in my chart, Mars in the 2nd house, the house of possessions, the house of resources, of supporting yourself, what goes into your body, what supports you in life, what you take in. And there may be something where I have to sever and separate a possession or something like that that is reflective of the 4th house matter of my home and my domestic living situation, a shared resource of the Piscean Saturn in the 8th house, and the 12th house, which is solitude, peace, self-undoing, and maybe needing to smooth out some of my own self-undoing through this process. So like being able to work with my own belief system, mental health with Jupiter in the 12th house, that could be the smoothing process, could help me to let go of something that is impeding my own ability to support myself, that has a relationship with my own either family, home, and a shared resource. So that's the Mars one, the kiting. And it may have to do with passing on a legacy too, because we're talking about Virgo 3. In Carl's chart, he has Venus in the 4th house. Okay, so picture Venus in the 4th house in Virgo. So this is the focal point is going to be something in his domestic situation. He is going to have the 6th house Mars and Mercury in Scorpio. Okay, something to do with either a pet maybe, or having to do with like a health issue, or how you organize your routines, or something that draws you away from completion. He's going to have that trining his 10th house, where Saturn and Neptune are going to be hanging out. So this is going to be affecting how he presents himself publicly, or his praxis out in the world. And then that's going to be trining his 2nd house, Jupiter in Cancer, right? So that might be something. So if we think 2nd, 6th, and 10th, personal resources, health issues, public faces, and all of that supporting the need to bring some harmony to a domestic situation, okay? Because it's Venus in Carl's case. He is going to be trying to harmonize something within his domestic situation, where I might be trying to release something that is in my possession. And I can already tell what might be happening at the end of the month for myself. Carl, you can comment if there's something going on in your home that may be related to your financial way you support yourself, your health, and your public face, that could be leading to an attempt to harmonize and pass on a legacy within your home or within your family. I know in my case, what I really want to do towards the end of this month is just organize and clear out all the crap that I have in my house. I have a lot of books, I have a lot of stuff, and it's starting to just cramp my living space. And I think that the grand kite, I guess, formation is going to be supportive in me clearing out that stuff and getting organized. And maybe that's what it'll mean for you too, Carl, but in your own way. I hope that's helpful. I know it's not, we didn't bring it up on the screen to visualize, but I hope just by hearing it talked out in that way can be helpful. Silent Murmur is saying, I'm just trying to help, just hoping you avoid past mistakes I made where replanting some things after it got too cold. It seemed best to be sure roots are okay and then put outside. Straw sounds good. I appreciate that, friend. I would hope to avoid any mistakes as well. Like there is the early cold is sort of, I don't know how early it is here in Michigan, but I'm trying to move a tree also. If you have any advice on moving a spruce tree and when the best time to do it is before it grows another 3 feet, that would be great. I don't want to get into too much of a thing on that, but I have a spruce tree that's about 10 feet tall right now. It's too close to my house, and I need to move it before it keeps growing. So we'll see what the Kairos moment is with that too. Carl says, thank you. That was helpful. Oh, appreciate that, Carl. And yeah, we can discuss it more in Deck and Walk, since you are one of our wonderful Deck and Walk participants. All right, friends. So that's our grand water trine with Mars here. Now, as I move forward towards the 29th and the end of our kind of exploration here, what we have is Mercury moving out of Scorpio and into Sagittarius, into its exile. Okay, so you can see here in the chart, Mercury moving into the first 10-degree section of Sagittarius and immediately opposing Uranus. Immediately. Okay, so that ingress is going to feel a little bit destabilizing because Mercury is going to be moving into its exile in Sagittarius, a Jupiter-ruled sign, and immediately opposing Uranus. Now, if we think about this in context, we have done, hopefully, the hard work of returning forms that don't serve us anymore to the earth willingly. And when that happens, the transition to Sagittarius 1 is a liberation of energy and of like a search for a new form, a new host, a new body. So we may be asking some questions about like, holy shit, we just let go of this thing and I feel so much lighter. I need to find a new thing. I need to find a new vehicle for that energy to be poured into. But that could feel really good. It could be a little bit shocking and destabilizing, but I think that ultimately this Mercury has Decanic rulership in the first 10-degree section of Sagittarius. I think ultimately that could be a good feeling that could shock you out of patterns of thinking because you have freed up this energy, feng shui, whatever it is, for a new start. What I will warn you about this is that Mercury is going to station retrograde at about 6 degrees of Sagittarius. This decade is all about speed and haste. So when that energy is liberated, be very careful of like hubris. What I have learned about Uranus in the past few months since doing some intense study with it with Liz Green's book and when it was moving into Gemini is that Uranus can often be representative of hubris of trying to attain the fire of the gods like Prometheus. And oftentimes the thing that we start can get out of control, right? Like Frankenstein's monster. I talked a lot about the Mary Shelley Frankenstein and Percy Shelley in the Uranus in Gemini live stream that you can find on my channel. But we may have these ideas that are so cosmic, I guess you could say, that they're very difficult for one individual to control. So be cognizant of the ideas that come when Mercury is in Sagittarius with the touching of Uranus there, the opposition. You may want to move really quickly because you've got some amazing idea because you've liberated energy from letting go of a form that isn't serving you. But be very careful about that because you could miss a lot of really important details that Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius could be very painful when we move forward at around November the 9th when Mercury moves retrograde. So don't rush things, even though you're like feeling electric. The electricity that comes with like finally feeling like you've let go of something that was holding you down, right? Very important to take your time with this aspect, in my opinion. And then finally, Mercury is going to sextile Pluto around the 30th, around our Halloween time here. Okay, so Mercury is going to be making contact with Pluto here. And then it's going to be moving out of bounds during that period. So those ideas that you have, like they are going to be coming from left field when they are out of bounds. We could be saying things that we wouldn't normally say. We could be having ideas that we might normally not have. And we may want to act on them before thinking them through, especially with Mercury out of bounds. But again, I will give you the warning as my professional opinion as an astrologer that because Mercury is going to be stationing retrograde, those ideas are going to have to be up for review once again. If you move too quickly, you're going to create potentially more problems than you solve, okay? Because Mercury is going to retrograde, I believe, back into an opposition to Uranus again. So if the shock that you get, you'll have to revisit if you're acting too rashly within that space. Okay, so just the final idea here is that we do have the full moon that this new moon is leading up to in Taurus, excuse me. The moon will be at 13 degrees of Taurus in its exaltation. The sun is going to be at 13 degrees of Scorpio. The moon will be hosted by Venus in her own domicile. The sun's going to be hosted by Mars in Sagittarius. So we will break that down in a future episode in detail. But just the balance between merging together with somebody in Scorpio 2 to glean the essence out of something, not necessarily as a permanent revisitation. And then also the moon in the second decan of Taurus, this is really close to my natal moon. This is more about how do we find the right pace? How do we find the right energy day to day, the right habits, How do we balance out giving and receiving? This is an important thing that's coming here. I'll let you know how it works out because it's exactly conjunct my native midhaven in the 10th house. But we'll break it down in a future episode as well. All right. I think that's what we've got here. Devin stopping in. What's up, Devin? DevRev. What's going on? I think I mentioned you earlier. I was talking about Portland and sort of the illusions that are coming out of people in power and the gaslighting associated with Scorpio 3 and working through those challenges. And it's nice that you've made an appearance here. Tell us what's really going on over in your neck of the woods. Probably nothing. Probably just people just living their lives is what I'm assuming. You're a Dicey Vegas says, I hear releasing addiction is not what you lose by quitting, but what you gain with that freedom. Say it louder for people in the back, friend. But stay slow and steady and don't get overly confident. Just listen. Don't push. I love that. I love that. Right? That is an excellent way of thinking about it. You know, and that transition from Scorpio 3 to Sagittarius 1 is super important. It's freedom. That's what you're doing because you're not bound to that old form, that thing that is keeping you in a state of suspended animation. It feels so good of what you're gaining, right? And the same is true when we get rid of things in our living spaces that don't serve us anymore. We let go of a relationship that has become toxic, or we let go of a place that doesn't resonate with us. All of these things, like, we feel we're moving towards freedom. And to me, that is just a beautiful way of thinking about it, because then we don't get fixated on the loss. We start to regain the hope of finding new forms that will be healthy for us and animating for us. So I love that, friend. Devin says, in regard to Portland, nothing but dancing frogs here. That's what I thought, nothing but dancing frogs. I love that. Says 99% of the city is oblivious to what's happening at the ICE facility. Yeah, it's not burning down. It's people are just living their lives. So this was in reference to Devin. We were talking about the ability to find peace in Libra 3, right? And the ability to sort of tune out some of the noise that's trying to get us to feel fear and to rile us up towards reactions, especially on the internet. Sometimes the best way to restore that peace is just disconnect for a little while rather than be subject to all of the machinations of power. So yeah, and this is a really good way of coming into the understanding of our next hexagram. But we've got Silent Murmur's got one more spruce advice for us. Says, I think the spruce can adjust if you move it on a mild day that the overnight temp is also mild. If you adjust, the new hole is ready at first and the spruce is moved quickly, then it will adjust the best. I like that. I'll have to find a fairly mild evening, make sure we got the holes dug correctly, and get it away from the pipes and next to the house, friend. Thank you for your advice with that. Appreciate it. Devin says, we're trying to get ICE evicted, but we've had our general state troops say that the troops would be protecting the protesters. Interesting. So we're getting updates from people in the ground level here. So and I think it is important to have conversations with people in the areas that are dealing with authoritarianism and dealing with some of these challenges. Getting it right from the horse's mouth, right? Sorry, don't mean to call you a horse or anything, Devin, but like getting it from the boots on the ground, right? And understanding that everything that we see on the internet, especially with AI, isn't always exactly how things are. And we're going to have to become even more cognizant of that as we move forward into this new generation of what is truth, of truth being malleable, and of do we trust our eyes or not, especially with online things, when people are utilizing technology to try to control us and try to rile us up. So being able to talk to people like Devin who live in the places that we're seeing in the news is extremely valuable. Being able to connect with people on this real level, right? It's super important moving forward. That to me is going to help us to maintain the peace that we need through this new moon in Libra, is getting a sense of reality, talking to people, having meaningful exchanges with people, and then not being so subject to the twists and turns of 2K that we get through the news, through people shouting at old men shouting at clouds, right, on the internet, and everybody getting into conflicts with one another. It's can be so exhausting, and I'm so grateful to get to know people from all over the world, not just in America, but all over the world, so that I can hear what's happening in their experiences rather than making assumptions about what's going on in their lives just from a cable news network. You know what I'm saying? Like, those relationships are so valuable. So how can we continue to build those moving forward? Devin says, I feel like the current administration is trying to use a reality TV style of pushing their agenda. I mean, it's authoritarianism 101, right? It's narcissism 101, where you gaslight people into capitulation to your control. So yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating for sure. But Devin, thank you for giving us the updates, boots on the ground style, and keep Portland weird. I guess is what I will say. Keep Portland just kooky and weird, and it sounds like an amazing place. So maybe someday I'll get out there and be able to visit all of you out there. All right, friends, let's do an I-Ching and wrap it up for the day. So the I-Ching that I have for you today, my friends, is the 42. And this is a hexagram called increase. It also translates to benefit, harvest, enrichment, generosity, sharing your bounty. And it's changing to the hexagram 21, which talks about biting through a challenge, really working through something like a piece of something tough that we're chewing through to get through to the other side. Okay, so I'm going to read you a little bit from Jack Balkin's book. It says, you are in the midst of a very fortunate time, one that offers excellent opportunities to resolve all old problems and start new projects. You can now make progress on things that seemed too difficult before. Obstacles fall away. Your relationships with others bloom and grow. Everything flourishes. There are two reasons why things are going so well. First, people look out for each other, and in do so help each other out. The cooperation brings success. When those who are more powerful and influential positions act to benefit those with less status and influence, everyone benefits. When people feel that those in charge have their interests at heart, they willingly cooperate in even the most ambitious projects, and even the most difficult tasks can be completed successfully. Second, things are prospering because people pay attention to the fundamentals rather than to surface appearances. When a choice has been made between making outward aspects of things more impressive or strengthening foundations, people choose the latter without hesitation, and they are right to do so. So this is about like securing your foundation, not just putting a fresh coat of paint on something. How do you build that foundation up? How do you get to what is real, right? That is how we're going to help increasing this benefit, by cooperating with one another, securing our foundations, and acting with each other's best interest in mind. Okay. Now there are two changing lines within this. It says in the fourth place, the changing lines, he says, he walks in the central path and reports to the Duke, who follows his advice. It is beneficial to use this in order to move the capital city. He goes on to say, moving the capital city was an especially difficult and important undertaking. Sounds like moving the spruce tree, like as we were talking about earlier today, which would only be entrusted to the most able and reliable persons. As in the previous line, to walk in the central path means to be principled and modest, but it also means being positioned between the authorities who plan and those who carry out the plan, i.e., to be an intermediary or a go-between. If you find yourself in the role of mediator between two different sides or between different groups of people within an organization, make sure that you are objective and fair to all concerned. Make clear to all sides how they can profit from cooperating, and work to ensure that everyone does in fact benefit. Emphasize to those in authority the importance of spreading benefits widely to those below, and emphasize to those below the importance of commitment to a common enterprise and cooperation with those in authority. If you are reasonable and fair-minded, people will trust and respect you, and they will follow your advice. Your influence in the situation will be highly beneficial, for when people work together for the general good, they can attempt even the most difficult undertakings with complete success. Okay. So we have to, if we find ourselves in roles of mediation between one another, We have to make sure we're taking each other's side into cooperation and into commitment to one another and having open lines of communication. The changing line at the 5th place says, if you are sincere and have kindness in your heart, you need not ask. Supreme good fortune. When there is sincerity, kindness is your power. Ooh, I like this one. It says, if you truly have a kind heart, you do not need to worry about whether what you have done is the right thing. Your generosity and sincere concern for the welfare of others means that whatever you do will ultimately be for the best. People who are truly kind do not act in order to be rewarded for their good deeds. They are generous and kind, and because of their inner compulsion of their character, nevertheless, others recognize their worth all the same, and their influence spreads widely. Hence, the text says that when you are sincere, kindness is your power. What you do out of the goodness of your heart and without thought of gain will nevertheless bring you influence and recognition. It sounds familiar. We've been talking about that on this channel. Kindness is our fundamental kind of way that we're trying to move through the world. It empowers us to be kind. That is the revolutionary act right now. Just as Devin has told us that with boots on the ground, basically in Portland, that people are just living their lives. They're still dressing up in their frog suits, just like loving life. Their kindness is their power. Okay. So this is true in other situations in life as well. Your kindness is your power. That is your revolutionary act when people are trying to stoke up fear and hatred. Kindness and goodwill and reciprocity is the truly revolutionary act in those times. Hexagram number 21 translates to biting through, reform, acting decisively, doing justice. Jack Balkin says this hexagram traditionally represents criminal penalties or recourse to law and order to enforce justice. More generally, it is concerned with the need for energetic reform. The basic metaphor of this hexagram is a person who bites through an obstruction. When there is danger of significant deterioration or lasting injury, vigorous action is necessary to do justice and restore proper conditions. Something has gone wrong. It may be a transgression or an injustice. Someone may be taking advantage of you, or you may have fallen prey to bad habits. Whatever the cause of the situation, reform is imperative. You must take a firm stand now. Things must change. Half measures will not do. You must cut through to the heart of the situation and approach it with complete clarity. Then you will understand what needs to be done, and you must act. This is not a time to be meek and pliant. Attack the problem with energy and determination. If you do not act quickly and decisively, the problem will not go away, and it may only become worse. Nevertheless, this does not mean you should be reckless. Prompt and efficient action is necessary, but your action should be based on clear thinking rather than emotion. It should be the result of careful planning rather than blind instinct. The best approach now is one that is firm but reasonable, fair but resolute. That sounds an awful lot like Mars cutting through, biting through, and being supported by the justice of an exalted Jupiter in Cancer and the realism of Saturn in Pisces. So yes, we may have to restore some equilibrium, restore some harmony to the situation. We may have to bite through an obstacle towards doing so. But if we can do so with clarity, with patience, with centeredness, with kindness, we may be much more effective. And be very cognizant of Mercury once it moves into Sagittarius, that we may lose some of that clarity. We may lose some of that patience, especially with an opposition to Uranus. When you know that in advance as an astrologer, you know that those feelings that come through you, like when Mercury moves into Sagittarius, you might be agitated. It's like, all right, it's time to go, especially with the opposition with Uranus. Just because you have that feeling coursing through you does not mean that you have to act or answer to it. That's where the practices come in. That's where the meditation practices comes in. That's where the centering and balancing practices come in, is through understanding that, all right, I know the planets are trying to influence me towards these actions, but I also have a will. I also have a spiritual practice that can be the mitigating factor to all of that. So lean into that this week. Okay, we've got the deer here as our animal, and I have a beautiful buck here, a white-tailed deer buck, because I thought it just has some great dignity. I think it looks like fall in the picture. And the deer talks a lot about navigating through gentleness, through kindness, also through trusting intuition, okay? But letting ourselves be guided. It symbolizes, I'm going to read you a little bit from Animal Frequency by Melissa Alvarez. Deer symbolizes a gentle nature, sensitivity, potentially having an unclear direction, and sacrifice. Remember, we talked about sacrifice with the Venus conjoining Diadem, the fixed star, in this new moon. There is a beauty and wonder to this nimble creature. Deer connects to the purpose of your soul. This is a time of awakening, of realizing your true self and your path must take in, of realizing the path and that your true self must take in this lifetime. Deer inspires you to be aware, focused, and observant. Its large eyes remind you that the eyes really are the windows to the soul. Look inside to see the wonder that is you. Deer prefers a simple life filled with quiet and peace. You may get overly stressed in a hectic environment. Having to work in an overly competitive or hectic workplace can make you just want to run away or find a different type of work altogether. Deer prefers to stay in the background and out of the spotlight, but its beauty, gracefulness, and compassionate nature pulls it to the forefront time and time again. Deer alerts you to the danger, aggressive people, or negative situations, and it advises you to distance yourself from them. When deer crosses your path, it is a sign that you need to reevaluate your feelings. Are you trusting your gut instincts like you should, or are you ignoring them? Are you being overly sensitive, holding grudges, being judgmental, or too fearful? Now is the time to make changes if you're doing any of those things. Let deer show you a calm, peaceful path where you can turn any negatives into positives. Deer means that there are opportunities coming your way, and this time, instead of saying no like you usually do, say yes. Step out of your comfort zone and enjoy a phenomenal experience. Take time to truly live. Now, one of the things that sticks out to me with that, just thinking about the astrology of the moment, not only does Scorpio help us to eliminate old forms, it also helps us to eliminate old belief systems, old grudges. I think that one of the things that could be extremely powerful about this period of time, with a new moon planting the seed for peace, is releasing an old grudge with these grand water trines, of taking a belief system where we're holding on to old angers, old hatreds, old traumas. And how do we put that to rest? How do we liberate that energy? Because when you hold on to that anxiety, that stress, those negative emotions, man, I'll tell you what, there's such a burden to carry. So how do we release those types of things as well? I think the deer is a helpful guide for this as well. And it just encourages us to be calm, to be peaceful. I have deer that I come into contact with in this woods behind the school that we walk in our neighborhood. And every time I come in contact with them, I always slow down, I always stop, and I always ask them permission to come into their woods. And I say, hey, I would love to share this space with you. And instead of like them bounding off in a scared fright, they're just walking around, peacefully, because I've communicated with them that, hey, I'm not a threat. I just want to share this woods with you. I know that this is your home, and I'm a guest in your home. And they can be very peaceful if you don't feel like you're a threat to them. And the same is true with people. Like if you talk about your things that you're having a challenge with, if you say, hey, ask permission to be in their space, ask to work through the challenges that you're having, rather than holding grudges and constantly coming with weapons unsheathed, swords unsheathed. You'd be amazed at the types of reactions that you might get. And some of that comes through your own peacefulness when you're entering into the space of others. If you come to relationships, even relationships that have been really difficult in the past, if you come tensed up, ready for a fight, you might get a fight. If you come to that relationship in the spirit of reconciliation, you'd be amazed at some of the wonders that can happen. Now, there may be certain things in relationships in your life or grievances that you don't need to repair, that you need to let go of, right? Maybe there's something that you just say, I just need to sever and separate this out of my life, and then go on my way without holding on to the grievance that was born from that. So I think the deer can be a guide in that regard too, helping to let us go of old grievances through gentleness, through compassion, through care. Maybe we need to sever and separate ourselves from following every single twist and turn of 2K on the news, every single gaslight that people in power want us to be afraid of. Maybe you regain your sense of centeredness and peacefulness and regain connection and communication with your own soul when you bring some silence into your life. The deer can teach us that as well. All right, my friends. I think that's what I've got for you today. I'm just going to check back in with the chat here. Silent Murmur's got some more advice for us with the, let's see here. What is the text I'm reading? I'm reading the I-Ching, and it is the Laws of Change by Jack Balkin, my favorite translation of the I-Ching. Dicey says, so glad I got to be here to hear such hope for how my journey is supported in the stars. Lots of hope to kindle, even though the news can be a whole nother darkness. Yeah, I appreciate you, friend. We have to uplift each other. I'm not without my dark days. You know, I try to bring my best, most hopeful self to these live streams to try to be a beacon of light of what I want to see in the world. But, you know, we all need uplifting. And I think that just being and showing up for one another in these spaces, I think is super important. And I'm just so grateful that you've been here today, friend. Let's see. So Silent Murmur's got some good advice for Japanese maples. Oh, I love it. I love it. I'm going to come back to that, Silent Murmur, after the fact here, but appreciate all of your gardening advice today. Let's see. Nice. Rachel, love the deer emoji there. Let's see. Devin says it's interesting because it's deer hunting season. Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, you know, there's different cycles within life, and sometimes death is a part of life. And I'm not necessarily a hunter myself, but I can appreciate some of the energy that goes into wanting to understand where our food comes from, of understanding the cycle of life and death. I think if hunting is done in a reverent way, there can be some beautiful things about that experience. Sport hunting is not my thing. I think that that's wasteful and annoying and evil. But if you're hunting for sustenance and you're hunting for in a way that honors that animal, I think that there's some things that some beautiful things that can come out of that. Thank you, Lisa, for being here today. Appreciate you, friend. Okay, Jody says the power really is with the people. If only the people would realize that. Amen to that, Jody. And we're empowering each other today through all of this. So thank you for being here today in your presence. Javier says, with the deer, I thought of trauma and fawning. Yes, that could be an experience with that for sure, my friend. All right, folks, go find me over on my social media accounts at Spencer Michaud. You can find me on Instagram, Blue Sky, etc. Go check me out at spencermichaud.com. Go click on that book now button if you want to work together. I would love to work with you if you need guidance as far as a reading, tutoring. If you want to map out the next few months of your life and be prepared for the twists and turns of fate, be happy to help in that regard. If you want to educate yourself about more astrological and tarot stuff, go visit the store over there as well. Lots of good stuff. And then don't forget to support my beautiful partner, Tanya Andrews at Third Coast Mojo, and my beautiful daughter at Sag Moon Magic. All right, my friends, that's what I've got for you today. Have a good one. Hang in there. Try to get centered. Try to get peaceful. Bring some kindness to the world. Be the change that you want to see. Don't necessarily believe all the fear-mongering that you see on the news. Talk to people. Make friends in those spaces. Understand what's going on in reality in the world. Go get to know your neighbors. I've been trying to get to know my neighbors. You'd be amazed at the beautiful relationships that you can craft when you get to know the people in your community, not just online. We've created a beautiful neighborhood-like space here, but get to know your local community as well. All right, my friends, have a good one. Thank you. Appreciate all of you being here today. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another, and we'll see you the next time. Peace.